And good morning, everyone. Once again, welcome to the Kansas State Fair in Hutchinson and the Bretson Young Injury Lawyers Arena as we bring you now the U.S. senatorial debate as the focus, as we mentioned earlier, of the U.S. politics is squarely right here on the state of Kansas. My name is Greg Akagi, farm broadcaster with WIBW Radio and the Kansas Radio Networks, and I'll be serving as the moderator for the U.S. senatorial debate. Before I introduce the candidates, I want to introduce the folks who will be asking the questions. The new media member panel is Liz Montano. She is with the Kansas Radio Networks in Topeka. And then we also have two people who are on the governor's panel, Michael Schwenke, reporter anchor with KWCH Television in Wichita, and Nick Sween, the managing editor of the Hayes Daily News. And our timekeeper once again is Todd Pittenger, news director with KSAL Radio in Salina. The rules, very similar to what we had in the governor's debate. Two candidates will have 90 seconds for an opening and closing statements. They will have 1 minute to respond to questions, and the candidate who answers first also will have 30 seconds of rebuttal time. So, you're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to the candidates. So, on to our candidates. First off, Greg Orman, the independent candidate. Greg is an Olathe, Kansas businessman involved in several businesses, and he also co-founded the Common Sense Coalition in 2010. Mr. Orman, your opening statement.
Good morning. My name is Greg Orman. I grew up in a single-parent family. Good morning. My name is Greg Orman. I grew up in a single-parent...
Come on, folks. Settle down.
Good morning. My name is Greg Orman. I grew up in a single-parent family with 5 brothers and sisters. I learned how to solve problems at a young age. Having to share a bathroom sort of guaranteed that. I watched my mom struggle every month to pay our bills and make ends meet, but with the help of dedicated teachers, great public schools, I was able to go to college and ultimately start my own business. And while I've lived the American dream, I realize all is not right with America. Our system of government is broken, and we all know it. We're sending the worst of both parties there, bitter partisans who care more about pleasing extremists than they do solving problems. And we have serious problems to solve as a nation, from health care and higher education affordability, to stagnant wages, to living within our means as a country. If we don't solve these problems, our status in the world, our standard of living, and the very existence of the middle class in America is at risk. I've tried both parties, and like lots of Kansans, I've been disappointed. That's why I'm running for the United States Senate as an independent. I realize it's sometimes difficult to know what to think about a nonpartisan candidate. My opponent would like you to believe I'm a liberal, masquerading as an independent, while some Democrats are starting to call me a conservative. I guess they can't even agree on that. What I am is a fiscally responsible businessman who will work hard to go to Washington and solve problems, not play party politics.
Stop.
I will be beholden only to you, not to party bosses.
Stop,
and
please.
not to special interests.
All right. U.S. Republican Senator Pat Roberts is completing his 3rd term in the United States Senate. He served in the House of Representatives from 1981 to 1997, serving as chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, and has also served as chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He is the senior member of the Senate Agriculture Committee. Senator Roberts, your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thanks to WIBW for sponsoring this election, your event. It's a great day. Go Cats! This is a crucial election both for Kansas and our nation. When Bob Dole endorsed me for re-election, he said, when the world is on fire and there is chaos and scandal here at home, We must have proven and experienced leadership to safeguard our national security and get our economy on a sound track. There is only one candidate here today who has that experienced leadership. I have a proven record, and as a senior member of the Senate Ag and Finance Committees, I look forward to what we can accomplish together under a new Republican majority. We must stop the Obama agenda. But before we can do that, we have to break Harry Reid's stranglehold on the Senate. The House has passed over 350 bills, all of which are stuck in the Senate, where now good legislation goes to die. The choice is clear. I am the only candidate on this stage that will vote to put Harry Reid out to pasture and break the gridlock. Now, my opponent wants you to believe he's an independent. He is not. He is a liberal Democrat by philosophy. He has given thousands of dollars to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and listen to this, Harry Reid. Now, Kansans know better. They won't be fooled by opportunism or misleading campaign rhetoric. My first vote will be for a Republican majority in the U.S. Senate. That is a vote for Kansas, and you can count on it.
All right, before we get to our questions, by the way, and I echo Kelly's thoughts, I love the enthusiasm that we have seen here so far this morning. But a reminder, please be courteous in responding to each of the candidates, and please refrain from responding until they've completed their statements. The moderator, yours truly, has the authority to add time to a candidate if they feel like their response has been interrupted by audience members. You didn't come to hear me, you came to hear the candidates, and we'd like for that to happen, and for those who are undecided in their vote on November 4th. All right, let's get to the questions. And the first question will come from Liz Montano with the Kansas Radio Networks in Topeka, and this will go to Senator Roberts.
Thank you very much. And actually, my question is for either of you to answer, but Senator, the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers have a proposal to dramatically expand their jurisdiction of waters under the Clean Water Act, a plan that's come under sharp criticism from states, municipalities, agriculture, and business. Critics claim the waters in question are already regulated at the state level, and the plan is nothing more than a government overreach. Do you support the proposal? Why or why not?
I do not support the proposal of the government taking over the U.S. waters. On the last day of the Congress, we met with Secretary Gina McCarthy, 9 senators, and said to her how much damage this is going to do to farmers and ranchers. This proposal started out as 2 pages. Then there's 88 pages in the Federal Register, 363 pages if you want to read it. And yet we're supposed to be exempting farmers and ranchers. Folks, what we're talking about is farm ponds. Farm ponds are supposed to be clean enough so that all the farmers here at 5 o'clock can go swim in a farm pond. That's ridiculous. That's a farm pond that no self-respecting duck would ever land on. I told Gina McCarthy, and I showed her all those pages of paper. No farmer, no farm organization, nobody could figure that out. And we urged her to back off. Let the state control this. Our governor has a 50-year water plan. Let's work on that. Let's keep the federal government out. I'll tell you what she said. She said, we might back off. We might back off. I think she will back off. I think she will back off until the election. Then look out.
Mr. Orman, you have 1 minute.
I agree with Senator Roberts. Farm ponds shouldn't be regulated by the EPA. In fact, as a businessman, I have to face regulations every day. My father, who's owned a furniture store in Stanley, Kansas for 41 years, refers to this as the beehive of regulation. We end up facing regulatory burdens from state, local, and federal agencies, and I agree that those burdens are inappropriate and bad for business. What I will say is I think the senator could demonstrate more leadership here and could actually propose changes to the rules that make it explicitly clear that the EPA is not regulating farm ponds. And I think that's what he should have one of his staffers do so that there can be clarity for farmers in the state of Kansas.
Senator Roberts, 30 seconds rebuttal time.
Well, Greg, I've already done that. We already have a bill, and it's a bipartisan bill, and it asked the Secretary of EPA, Gina McCarthy, the very person that we were visiting with, back off. And as I said before all the crowd was shouting, I think she will until the election, and that's the way it is. But my opponent has a record of voting for Barack Obama, running against me as a Democrat, and donating to Harry Reid. If we didn't have Harry Reid in the Senate, we could consider that bill by Senator Barrasso, and we would take care of it.
The next question comes from Michael Schwenke with KWCH-TV in Wichita, and it will go to Mr. Orman.
Okay, this is for both, and I think we have to address it because it's been a little crazy here in the last few days. We were supposed to have 3 podiums up here on the stage. In the last few days, we've received news that the Democrat in this race has decided to take himself out of the race, although his name will remain on the ballot. Mr. Orman, you have said that this news was unexpected. Senator Roberts, you have said this was a corrupt bargain between Orman and National Democrats. How does this change the race?
If that question is addressed to me, what I will say is, and repeat what we said in our statement, it was unexpected by us. Now, I've been asked by a lot of people, did you have anything to do with it? And all I can say is, I think our progress in the polls was obviously something he had to take into consideration. I think the fact that our message is resonating with Kansans, that Kansans really do believe Washington is broken. They really do believe we're sending the worst of both parties, not just Republicans, not just Democrats, but both parties to Washington. And that if we want to solve our problems as a nation, we're going to have to get back into the serious business of problem solving instead of simply positioning to get reelected. And ultimately, that's what our campaign is about. That's the message that we brought to Kansans. That's what led over 11,000 Kansans to sign a petition to get us on the ballot.
Senator Roberts.
Well, this is the first time I've ever seen National Democrats really work very hard to get a Democrat off the ballot. And I've worked with Claire McCaskill across the aisle in a bipartisan manner, but I got to tell you, when Claire McCaskill calls the Democrat candidate and urges him to get off the ballot, you know something fishy is going on. And I have a message for Claire McCaskill. We've had a lot of people from Missouri come across the border. Just think of Quantrill. Stay in Missouri. Don't try to fiddle around with Kansas politics. Again, my opponent has a record of voting for Barack Obama, running against me as a Democrat, and donating to Harry Reid. If you want to make change in Washington, get rid of Harry Reid. Put him out to pasture. I'm the only candidate that can do that.
Mr. Orman, 30 seconds rebuttal.
Well, this does sort of create a really unique situation. I think it's the first time that I've heard a Republican complain about disenfranchising Democratic voters. I want to go to Washington to get rid of all partisanship and to focus on problem solving, and that's all this is about.
All right, the next question comes from Nick Sween with the Hayes Daily News, and this question will be to Senator Roberts.
Does semi-permanent residency matter for a senator or congressman? What are the pros and cons of returning to the district to live and work when Congress is not in session versus maintaining one's residence in the Washington area?
I know more about Kansas than anybody else on this stage. I have walked with families in the rubbles of Greensburg. I have stood with farmers in the fields of dust during the recent drought. I have in fields underwater where Missouri River flooded. I have been corner to corner and border to border. I have been in all 105 counties many times. I have been on more main streets than any other public official. As a matter of fact, Bob Dole just called me and he said he's out here trying to catch up. I am a fourth-generation Kansan. I was born here, educated here, done my life's work here. Don't tell me I'm not from Kansas. The people of Kansas elected me to go to the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate is in Washington. My home is Dodge City, and I'm damn proud of it.
Mr. Orman.
Well, I suspect, Senator, I've been to Dodge City more this year than you have. And
how many times?
And I've been there 4 times
5?
this year. I've been there 4.
Well, I've been about 7, so you're wrong on that.
Okay. Well,
thank you.
I'll look for the camera roll on that. And I've probably lived more of my adult years in Kansas than you have. But what I will say, to be perfectly candid, is I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters where someone lives. I think it matters how they vote. And when it comes to voting for Kansas and standing up for Kansas values, Senator Roberts has taken a sharp turn to the right. He voted against the Farm Bill. He voted against veterans' benefits. He voted against funding for NBAth. And ultimately, maybe the most egregious thing is when the VA reform bill came up, he didn't even bother to vote on it. And I think that's an affront to all Kansas veterans.
Senator Roberts, 30 seconds rebuttal.
Well, I've worked very hard for Kansas every day that I've had the privilege of public service. I stood up to the president keeping terrorists out of Kansas. I brought the big red one back to Fort Riley. I led the fight to ensure that the world's biggest tanker refueling fleet will be at McConnell. I am responsible for the Lewis and Clark Center being based at Fort Leavenworth. That's the finest military university in the world. I am the proud father of NBAF in Manhattan. Real jobs, real growth. It will transform our economy. And I protected and improved crop insurance for Kansas farmers. Here's a classic example. He doesn't know the Farm Bill.
Time. All right, the next question is from Liz Montano with the Kansas Radio Networks in Topeka, and this will be directed first toward Mr. Orman.
What action should be taken by Congress to curb the growing immigration crisis intensified by an influx of unaccompanied children fleeing Central America?
Great question. And the immigration crisis in America is an example of what's wrong with Washington. When my opponent went into the House of Representatives, we had 3 million undocumented people in this country. Today we have over 11 million. And both parties have had an opportunity to solve this problem. Both Democrats and Republicans have failed to solve it. What I've said is for immigration reform to work, it needs to be tough, practical, and fair. And by tough, I mean we need to secure our borders. We need to make sure that we continue our commitment to border security and secure our borders. By practical, I mean I think it's absolutely impractical to think that we're going to find and deport 11.5 million people. And I think it's frankly ill-advised. There are whole towns in western Kansas that would go away. The agricultural industry, the meatpacking industry would go away. So how do we make it fair to taxpayers? If you're here on an undocumented basis, you should register with ICE, pay a fine, obey our laws, hold down a job and pay taxes, and then I think you should be able to stay here. But let's be clear, this is a problem both parties have failed to solve.
Senator Roberts.
Secure the border. No amnesty. One of the biggest problems we're going to face right away when I go back to Washington is the President of the United States, who says he will declare by executive order an immigration policy with amnesty. You know, I think it's ironic. We wouldn't have this tremendous problem on the border unless the President of the United States 2 years ago told people 16 years and under they would not be deported. As a result, we've seen thousands come over the border. We have to secure the border. It is a humanitarian problem that has to be done. Ladies and gentlemen, we wouldn't have this problem if we didn't have Barack Obama and Harry Reid in the Senate. And every day, I am fighting to undo the damage that my opponent has caused with his support for Obama and for Harry Reid.
Mr. Orman, 30 seconds rebuttal.
This may surprise some people, but I actually agree that President Obama taking executive action on immigration and bypassing Congress isn't the right thing to do. I believe that we are a nation of laws. And as a result of that, I really do believe that we need to solve this problem legislatively, but that's where the failure lies. Both parties have had an opportunity to solve this problem, and both parties haven't had the political courage to address it.
All right, the next question comes from Michael Schwenke with KWCH-TV in Wichita, and this will be addressed to Senator Roberts.
Okay, thank you. Kansas continues to lag behind other states and the national average when it comes to job growth. If elected, how will you specifically support job growth and new business development in Kansas?
Well, my record shows... Make it rain. Greg, can I have a little help here?
Ladies and gentlemen, please, like we said, we want you to be courteous. Let the candidates answer their questions. You can respond to the candidates, but we want both sides to be fair on this to be able to do that.
I think the business climate in Kansas is such that people want to know how to plan ahead. They want certainty. They don't want all this tremendous overflow with regulations. I have a comprehensive bill on regulatory reform. I have every Republican vote and 10 covert Democrats because they didn't want to tell Harry Reid. Harry Reid would not even let us vote on it. But look at the record. Look at the record. I have brought jobs back when we had the tanker base at McConnell, when we had the biggest university in America and the world up at Leavenworth, the intellectual center of the Army, the Big Red One moving back to Kansas, and yes, NBAF. NBAF will be $3.5 billion to the Kansas economy. I'm the father of NBAF. We will get it done this session, and it will be the jewel in our effort for the Animal Health Corridor, which will help transform our Kansas economy.
Mr. Orman.
I agree with the senator's statement that we need to have certainty, but what certainty means is Congress needs to start getting its business done. I spoke with Barry Flinchbaugh at K-State, and Dr. Flinchbaugh said we would have significantly more growth in the ag sector in Kansas if we created certainty in our immigration policy. I think we would have significant additional growth and investment if Congress just got their act together and let American businesses know that we're going to solve our financial crisis that we have in this country. And so I think Congress getting their act together is first and foremost what we need to do. The other thing I will say is I've built and grown businesses my whole life. I've traveled the state of Kansas. I know that to build industry in Kansas is going to require a very diverse approach. What we need in western Kansas isn't the same thing we need in Manhattan and isn't the same thing we need in the Kansas City area. And so I think we need to take a very, very distinct approach that distinguishes between the needs of our regions in order to create jobs and create growth in this state.
Senator Roberts, 30 seconds rebuttal.
Getting business done. Really. Getting business done in the United States Senate Really. 350 bills have come from the House, and they're gathering dust in the Senate. This is where good legislation goes to die. It's because of Harry Reid, who will not allow any amendment, Republican or Democrat. He doesn't want to put his Democrats online. I am the only one on this stage that can make a Republican majority, put Harry Reid out to pasture, and get things done.
All right, the next question comes from Nick Sween, managing editor of the Hayes Daily News, and will be addressed to Mr. Orman first.
The winner of this election likely will play a significant role in the development of the next farm bill. What do you see as key elements necessary to equip Kansas producers with the tools to feed a growing and hungry world?
Well, first and foremost, as it relates to the Farm Bill, the farmers I've talked to around the state say the most important element of it to them is the crop insurance program. They need to be able to plant their crops with certainty. And we're in a world where we've got significantly more uncertain weather patterns, so I think that's absolutely vital to the development of the ag economy in Kansas and to farmers in Kansas. The other issue we obviously face is water. As Senator Roberts referred to the governor's 50-year water plan, but I also think we need to look at the Farm Bill and make sure that we're not inadvertently encouraging or discouraging the planting of low water intensity crops. I've talked to farmers in Kansas who've said they'd like to plant more milo, they'd like to plant it, but the cost of insuring it through the federal crop insurance program is significantly more expensive than planting corn. And milo, as we know, consumes half as much water. So I think we need to make sure that our federal farm programs encourage water conservation so that we can preserve that resource for western Kansas.
Senator Roberts.
Well, I thank my opponent for bringing up crop insurance. Bob Kerrey, a Democrat from Nebraska, Pat Roberts from Kansas, forged the crop insurance program some time ago. I am a father of the crop insurance program. And in this farm bill, it was tough because there were enemies of crop insurance. I protected it, I saved it, and we improved it. That's a significant thing that we done. Now, he says I voted against the farm bill. Number one, it goes in the wrong direction. Many of these farmers aren't going to worry about low-intensity water, and goodness knows I don't want the federal government trying to control that. But at any rate, farmers will now be planning for the government instead of making the decisions themselves. Second, more regulations, and goodness knows we don't need any of that. And lastly, food stamps. If there is ever a program that cries for reform, both for the taxpayer and those who truly need it, it is food stamps. None of that happened. On the basis of that, I voted no on the farm bill, but we protected and improved crop insurance.
Mr. Orman, 30 seconds rebuttal.
Well, Senator Roberts raised food stamps, and there's no question, and I've said this a lot in the campaign, that while it's harder than ever for the average American to get ahead, it's also paradoxically easier to do nothing with your life. And I think we do need to reform the social safety net and look at those programs that are being abused and try to figure out a real simple question. Are they promoting upward mobility and accountability, or are they promoting complacency and dependency? And I agree that the ones that are promoting complacency and dependency need to be changed.
Okay, the next question comes from Liz Montano, Kansas Radio Networks in Topeka. And this question will be directed first towards Senator Roberts.
Military budget cuts have been affecting our troops, both active duty and National Guard, especially following the drawing down of troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Guard has a dual mission to fight for our nation and to protect our state, responding to disasters here at home. What will you do to help ensure our National Guard troops continue to get the needed funding to train for both war and domestic response?
First thing we do is exempt the military from the sequester. That means more money for our troops. We are now at lower levels than we've ever been since World War II. Our first obligation when we go to Washington is to protect our individual freedoms. As the senior Marine in the Congress, I sure as heck know that. Now, let me just say that our military security, our national security strategy can be summed up with the President saying, we don't have a strategy. We have to have a strategy. With ISIS, the latest savage terrorist group that intelligence services have told us will make an attack on America, we must remain vigilant. So I will be supporting the military, always have, as the senior Marine in the Congress. That's where I am. We take that hill.
Mr. Orman.
I agree with Senator Roberts. Sequester is a problem. But let's remember what sequester is. Sequester is the greatest example of Washington's failure to get their act together. As part of a debt ceiling agreement, we were supposed to put together this super committee, supposedly of the best legislators from both parties, and they were supposed to come up with targeted cuts to help get our budget back under control. Sequester was the penalty provision that was never supposed to happen. And as no greater example of our inability to get things done in Washington, we have sequester. I agree it's a real problem when it comes to our military. I talked to the head of AUSA in Fort Riley, General Maddox, and he gave me a very detailed briefing on what sequester is going to do to troop levels, what it's going to do to readiness and preparedness, and it's a huge problem that needs to be addressed.
Senator Roberts, 30 seconds rebuttal.
The sequester was thought up by Jack Lew and President Obama, the man you contributed to, the man you supported, and the man that you voted for. We would not have this kind of a problem with this administration making such drastic cuts to the defense budget. And with regards to the sequester, they exempted, meaning the Democrat majority, they exempted all the entitlement programs and the food stamp programs and targeted the military, thinking that Republicans would never go along with it. Well, Republicans surprised them because we have an $18 trillion debt. And so we wanted everybody under the sequester or not.
Time. Just one note as well, if you want to go back and listen to this debate afterwards, you can go to our websites, either kansasagnetwork.com or WIBWnewsnow.com. If you didn't DVR the K-State game, I'm sorry. I can't help you there. So, all right, the next question.
Score is 31-21.
The next question comes from Michael Schwenke, KWCH-TV in Wichita, and this will be directed first towards Mr. Orman.
Senator Roberts touched on this. I don't want to follow up. 2 American journalists have recently been executed by the group ISIS. Do you agree with the president's actions thus far? What's been done right? What's been done wrong? And how do you think the U.S. should deal with ISIS?
Well, ISIS is a huge issue. I mean, we spent thousands of lives of Americans. Tens of thousands of people were injured. We spent hundreds of billions of dollars trying to prevent Muslim extremists from having a stronghold in a Middle Eastern country. And the vacuum that we've left has allowed them to form. And so I think we need to do everything in our power to make sure that ISIS cannot stand. And so in terms of airstrikes, absolutely. In terms of providing military advice and counsel to the Iraqis, I think that's absolutely necessary. And I think we're going to have to take further measures to be able to address ISIS. One of the things that we need to consider here is that we don't have a properly functioning Iraqi government. And ultimately, to solve the problem in that region, they are going to need a properly functioning Iraqi government. And that's probably, at the end of the day, the biggest single issue that we have to deal with if we're going to be able to address the ISIS threat.
Senator Roberts.
The president is known for over a year on his daily briefings that ISIS was growing as a threat. And yet we refuse to call the war against terrorism a war. You remember the mantra, Osama is dead and the terrorist threat is over, etc., etc. That's not correct, and the president knew that. Then he says we do not have a strategy. Folks, we got to have a strategy. We got to have a president that will stand up to the American people and demonstrate exactly what the dangers are to our national security, and then say, here is my strategy. Then he must come to the Congress and seek authorization. I don't know if I'm going to support that or not, depending on what his strategy is. We don't even know that yet. But I know one thing. I have serious doubts if this president has the will or the ability to conduct any military operation. He has a view of America of leading by following. And leading by following has caused all of these voids, and bad people have filled these voids.
Time. Mr. Orman, 30 seconds rebuttal.
You know, I think we can go back to the beginning of the Iraq War and say that a lot of mistakes were made. I think mistakes have been made on both sides of the aisle. I think mission accomplished was a mistake. It was clear that we hadn't solved our problems at that point in time. And I don't disagree with the senator that I think as a United States senator, when the president comes to you with a plan, you have to consider it. And I'm actually happy to hear Senator Roberts say he would consider it, because previously he said he would fight President Obama at every turn, and I think that's a much more reasonable position to take.
Our next question comes from Nick Schween, managing editor of the Hayes Daily News, and this will be directed towards Senator Roberts.
Where do you stand on the issue of legalization of marijuana in the U.S.?
That's not a federal issue. That's a state issue. If you want to get a Rocky Mountain high, go west. That should be for the Kansas legislature and the governor to decide, not federally.
You know, we've had a federal policy in this country since the Nixon administration that doesn't seem to be working. We've spent over $1 trillion on it. With that said, as the senator has mentioned, we do have states that have started to work with different policies as it relates to legalization. And I think it would be prudent for us to take a step back, watch what happens in those states before we determine how we want to change federal policy.
Senator, would you like the rebuttal time on that?
I don't have a rebuttal on that.
Okay. The next question comes from Liz Montano, Kansas Radio Networks in Topeka, and this will be directed first towards Mr. Orman.
The Patriot Act was hammered out in short measure following 9/11 and is now believed by many to be an overreach by the federal government, which unduly infringes on the rights and civil liberties of law-abiding citizens. A case in point could be the recent IRS scandal. Do you feel the Patriot Act is appropriate as is, or does it need modifications? Please elaborate on why you feel as you do.
Well, obviously, we passed the Patriot Act at a time when our country was under attack by terrorists. And we passed it with great intentions. And ultimately with the belief that this is what we needed to do to protect our citizens. And I think it's a very fine line that we walk between protecting our citizens and infringing upon their legitimate rights of privacy. And so what I would say is, this is going to be an ongoing debate in our country. It's not going to be resolved in one election cycle. The Patriot Act will likely evolve, but it'll have to evolve as threats evolve. And right now, given what's going on with ISIS and the fact that we have named them as a terrorist organization, I think we need to make sure that we have the ability to protect the homeland, particularly if they're able to gain a foothold in the Middle East.
Senator Roberts.
I think we ought to keep the Patriot Act because of the terrorist threats that are growing. This is a delicate balance between civil liberties and our national defense, our safety in America. You mentioned the IRS scandal. I'm on the Finance Committee. We have been investigating the IRS scandal. And then all of a sudden, Lois Lerner lost her computer or her hard drive. And then there were 6 others. And so we refused to sign the Democrat report that said, well, we've gone enough and we can't get the communication from the White House or the Treasury. I want to tell you that as a member of the Finance Committee, that's bunk. I said no, I'm not signing that final report, and I said I will go to the floor of the Senate and I will talk about it. And so finally, on the Republican side, we said we're not going to sign that report until we get to the truth. The first vote that I will have when I go back to Washington is an attack by Harry Reid, of all things, to change the First Amendment. To change the First Amendment. And I have 5 minutes to talk against Harry Reid. This is the man he supported with money. This is the man that he supported in regards to the Obama administration. He's not independent. He is a liberal.
Senator. Mr. Orman, 30 seconds rebuttal.
Well, first, to address what Senator Roberts just said, I think we don't live in the information age so much as we live in the misinformation age. And I think what Senator Roberts wants to do is point to very, very small facts and distort my whole record. The facts are, I've supported both parties. I've been a member of the Republican Party. I've been a member of the Democratic Party. I've supported candidates from both parties. And candidly, I've been disappointed with both.
The next question comes from Michael Schwenke with KWCH Television in Wichita, and it will be directed first towards Senator Roberts.
Thank you. Our viewers often voice frustration with campaign finance laws, the amount of money involved in these races, and the ability of outside interest groups to fund certain candidates or issues. What's your opinion on candidates receiving money from those outside groups or interests?
Well, since I haven't received any, I really think the biggest issue of all is transparency. I think if people know where the money is coming from, I think that's the biggest reform we can make. I would also say that under the Citizens United Supreme Court ruling, they have ruled everybody has the right to free speech. That's the reason, by the way, that Harry Reid is going to try to amend the Constitution. He is. You can holler all you want, but Harry Reid has that amendment. And that amendment says, guess what? The Congress will determine how much money we can all give or anybody can give, and the Congress will determine what is reasonable. That is ridiculous. The Congress can't do a damn thing with Harry Reid at the helm.
Mr. Orman.
Senator, I've heard you say the word Harry Reid, Obama, fight a whole lot. What I haven't heard from you...
He's your buddy, man. He's your buddy.
What I haven't heard from you is solve problems. What I haven't heard from you... What I haven't heard from you is what you're going to do to get things done. And I think ultimately that's what the voters in Kansas need to hear from you. Now, in terms of special interests, I have vowed that I am not taking money from PACs because I want to go to Washington and represent only the citizens of Kansas. I don't want to go to Washington and have to worry about what the pharmaceutical industry thinks about what I might be doing. I don't want to have to go and worry about what the oil and gas industry thinks about what I'm doing. I want to go and worry about what's in the best interests of Kansans, and I want to solve problems for all Americans.
Senator Roberts, 30 seconds rebuttal.
I probably have 40 bills, 40 pieces of legislation covering every part of the Kansas economy that is being overregulated by this administration. The administration that my opponent is responsible for. 40 pending bills. I can't get them addressed. No Republican can offer an amendment in the Senate of the United States. We haven't had a budget in the Senate for 5 years. We don't do any appropriation bills. That's Harry Reid. He is a one-man rules committee. And it is a fact that you have given to Harry Reid, Hillary Clinton, President Obama. Why should anybody believe that you are independent?
Time. The next question comes from Nick Sween, managing editor of the Hayes Daily News. And this question will be first directed toward Mr. Orman.
What is your stance on gun control as it stands in the U.S.? Is there too little, too much? Are you comfortable with it now?
You know, I'm a gun owner. I own 2 guns. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the rights of people to keep and bear arms. When I got my guns, I had to go through a background check. And it was a relatively quick process. It took 5 minutes, and ultimately I was able to buy my guns without delay. I don't think that having a loophole that allows people who couldn't get guns at a legitimate gun dealer to get them otherwise is sound policy. And so I would be open to addressing the gun show loophole. And I think if you think about who gets prevented from buying guns, they're people we don't want having guns. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to figure out how to get it through the black market or figure out how to get it somewhere else. I just don't think it makes sense to make it easy for a convicted felon or someone who's under a restraining order for domestic abuse to be able to walk into a gun show and easily get a gun.
Senator Roberts.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. He's for the Second Amendment, but more federal controls, more federal requirements. I am for the Second Amendment. I have always stood for the Second Amendment to the right to bear arms. Now, let me point out, many of the things that my opponent has talked about are in law in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has the strictest gun control in America. And Washington, D.C. has one of the highest crime rates and resulting from guns in America. You can address that, but don't mess with people's right to bear arms with any restrictions. That's what President Obama does each and every time we talk about a crisis. That's what's going to come from the Obama administration. That's the man he supported. That's the man he gave money to.
Mr. Orman, 30 seconds rebuttal.
Actually, it's shocking that we didn't hear the name Harry Reid in that. It might be actually.
I just missed the opportunity. I'm sorry.
Well, I assumed it was because Harry Reid sided with you and voted against expanding background checks. So I guess we only talk about it when he doesn't vote with you. Ultimately, I think there has to be reasonable restrictions. We don't want people with bazookas. We don't want people with automatic weapons. Those are things that everybody agrees is reasonable. And I think that making sure that convicted felons don't have guns is probably a good thing.
The next question comes from Liz Montano, Kansas Radio Networks in Topeka, and it will be first directed towards Senator Roberts.
By dollars, Social Security is the biggest program run by the federal government. It's a program impacting someone in virtually every family in America. However, the financial stability of the program continues to be in question, with its trust fund predicted to be exhausted in 2036. What course of action would you push for to protect Social Security for today's seniors and strengthen it for future generations?
I'm not going to take away your Social Security. Don't worry about it. Anybody over 55 doesn't have to worry about any reform measure. You don't have to worry about doing anything with Social Security in the next part of this session. Harry Reid will block that real quick. It's not only Social Security that's broke. The United States is broke. $18 trillion worth of debt. And sometime, at some point, at some place, we're going to have to address all the entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But I will tell you one thing. With Obamacare taking money away from Medicare, that's a mistake. The Medicare reimbursement to our health care providers has caused a crisis to the rural health care delivery system. We have to save Medicare. We must honor the commitment to Social Security, and we have to fix Medicaid. I know that. But it's not going to happen now. It will happen when we change the Congress to a new Republican majority, and we can make a difference.
Mr. Orman.
By the way, just so we're clear, I agree that both chambers of Congress are run in an overly partisan way. I agree that Harry Reid is stopping progress on a lot of things, but so are the Republicans in the House. With that said, in terms of the question of Social Security, and I like the fact that Senator Roberts is talking about our $18 trillion debt, but let's not forget in the last decade, Senator Roberts voted for almost every spending bill. The presidential election in 2000 was the only election in my lifetime where we were talking about what to do with surpluses. And after Senator Roberts and Harry Reid went through spending, we spent trillions of dollars in the first half of that decade taking surpluses and turning them into deficits. So the idea that you're fiscally conservative is not necessarily demonstrated by the evidence.
Senator Roberts, 30 seconds rebuttal.
My opponent seems to have forgotten the $500 billion cuts that I have proposed since Obama came to power. That's a fact. You know, parties are not perfect. Everybody knows that. But there are some things you can't compromise on. You just can't waffle, you know? You can't compromise on terrorism. You can't compromise on your kids. You can't compromise on the future and the fact that you have to get this Senate turned around. I just want to know when you're going to take a stand and tell us what party you're going to caucus with. Are you going to be a Republican one day and a Democrat the next, and a Democrat one day and a Republican? Where are you going to be? Greg, come on.
Time, Senator, time. We hate to end on that note, but we do need to get to the closing statements. We do have, ladies and gentlemen, we do have time constraints on what we're allowed to do, so we do need to get to the opening statements. So how we drew. Mr. Orman, you have the first closing statement.
Thank you. Thanks to the panel for a terrific debate today, and thanks to Senator Roberts for being here, and for everyone who took the time to be here or listen at home. And a special thanks to my wife, Sybil, and my family for all their love and support. We're all Kansans. We believe in the value of hard work. We believe in accountability. And we believe in working together to get things done. It's time to elect a senator that shares those values. We're a country that put a man on the moon, that figured out how to harness the power of the atom, that figured out how to take computers that used to fill a room and put them on the head of a pin. I believe that country and those people, when they work together and put their minds together, can solve any problem. I'm running as an independent to reject the false choices that the two-party system has presented us with. I believe we can have affordable and high-quality health care. I believe we can have secure borders and a humane immigration policy. I believe we can balance our budget and meet our commitment to our seniors, and I believe we can have a new American century. But we won't get there. We won't get there if we keep electing partisans instead of problem solvers. I look forward to going to Washington to start a real conversation on how we solve our problems. Today, I'm asking for your vote in November to finally get Washington back into the business of solving problems for all Americans, regardless of party label. Because regardless of party label, we are all Americans, and we will rise or fall together.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to run out of time. Senator Roberts, your closing statement, please.
Elections determine the future of our country. Kansas needs someone in Washington with conviction and a backbone. I don't think my opponent has either. First, he says he's a Republican. Then he says he's a Democrat. Just this year, he becomes an independent. Ladies and gentlemen, what would Greg Orman be next year? Do you really want to risk our children and our grandchildren's future to that? Kansans know me. They know my record of fighting for Kansas. That fight must continue. I have voted against Obamacare every time, and I will continue that fight. We must stop President Obama from implementing amnesty by executive order. This is a humanitarian crisis. We must secure our border. I will continue that fight. My record is clear. Proposing nearly $500 billion in spending cuts since Obama came to power, I will continue that fight. And I will continue to protect our state's role in national security. Again, I am the proud father of NBAF in Manhattan, real jobs, real growth. My vision is our vision. I will fight to restore the freedom of Kansas families to choose their own health care, their own doctors. I will fight to pass the Keystone Pipeline to help us lead us to energy independence. That means real jobs for Kansas. Most of all, I will fight every waking minute to restore our faith in government, to restore our individual freedoms. I am the only one on this stage that can be trusted to change the Senate. I ask for your vote.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our broadcast for our radio folks. I'm Greg Akagi. Thank you for joining us here live from the Kansas State Fair.